Here we go. Hello, I'm reading from This Changes Everything by Naomi Klein. And we're dealing with her having children in the context of climate change. And I wanted to read this section of the book because we need to understand that these big principles, these big concepts affect our daily lives. Excuse the lighting, I'm in a different room, it's snowing out. Let me hurry up before we lose power because infrastructure is not good in this society. Then I stepped into the vortex I came to call the fertility factory. Do you have to call it that? My patient husband pleaded. In its labyrinth of rooms in a downtown office building, drugs, hormones, and day surgeries were dispensed as liberally as toothbrushes at a dentist's office. The working assumption was that any woman who stepped through the door will do whatever it takes to land a newborn in her arms, even if that means having 3 or 5 newborns instead of one, and even if that means seriously compromising her own health with risky drugs and poorly regulated medical procedures in the process. I did try to be a good patient for a while, but it didn't work. The last straw was a doctor telling me after my first and only round of in vitro fertilization, IVF, that I probably had egg quality issues and I should consider an egg donor. Feeling like a supermarket chicken past its best before date, and with more than a few questions about how much these doctors were driven by a desire to improve their own live birth success rates, I stopped going. I tossed the pills, safely disposed of the syringes, and moved on. Informing friends and family that I had given up on technological fix to my apparent inability to conceive was surprisingly difficult. People often felt the need to tell me stories about friends and acquaintances who had become parents despite incredible odds. I hate when people do that. Usually these stories involve people who got pregnant using one of the technologies that I had decided not to try, with the guilt-inducing implication that by drawing the line where I did, I was clearly not committed enough to procreation. Quite a few were about women who had used every technology available. 9 rounds of IVF, egg donors, surrogacy, and then gotten pregnant as soon as they stopped. Common to all these stories was the unquestioned assumption that the body's no never really means no, that there is always a workaround, and moreover, that there is something wrong with choosing not to push up against biological barriers if the technology is available. On some level, this faith is perfectly understandable. The female reproductive system is amazingly resilient. 2 ovaries and fallopian tubes when one would do hundreds of thousands of eggs when all that is really needed are a few dozen good ones, and a generous window of opportunity to conceive spanning ages 12 to 50, more or less. Yet what I felt my body telling me was that even with all this ingenious built-in resilience, there is still a wall that can be built, can be hit, a place beyond which we cannot push. I felt that well as a real structure inside my body, and slamming against it had left me bruised. I didn't want to keep bashing away. My resistance to further intervention did not come from some fixed idea about how babies should be conceived, naturally or not at all. I know that for men and women with clear infertility diagnoses, these technologies are a joyous miracle, and that for gay, lesbian, and trans couples, some form of assisted reproduction is the only route to biological parenthood. And I believe that everyone who wants to become a parent should have the option, regardless of their marital status, sexual orientation, or income. In my view, these procedures should be covered by public health insurance rather than restricted to those who can afford the astronomical fees. What made me uneasy at the clinic were, oddly, many of the same things that made me wary of geoengineers, a failure to address fundamental questions about underlying causes, as well as the facts that we see to be turning to high risk technologies, not just when no other options are available, but at least at the first sign of trouble, even as a convenient shortcut. TikTok women of a certain age are told. Where I live, for instance, the system makes it significantly less complex to find an egg donor or a surrogate than to adopt a baby. And then there is the matter of unacknowledged risk. Despite the casual attitude of many practitioners in this more than $10 billion global industry, the risks are real. A Dutch study, for instance, showed that women who had undergone the in vitro fertilization were twice as likely to develop ovarian malignancies. An Israeli one found that women who had taken the widely prescribed fertility drug clomiphene citrate, which I was on, were at significantly higher risk for breast cancer. And Swedish researchers showed that IVF patients in the early stages of pregnancy were 7 times more likely to develop a life threatening blood clot in the lung. Other studies showed various kinds of risks to the children born of these methods. I did not know about this research when I was going to the clinic. My concerns stemmed from a generalized fear that by taking drugs that dramatically increase the number of eggs available for fertilization each month, I was overriding one of my body's safety mechanisms, forcing something that was better not forced. But there was little space for expressing these doubts at the clinic. Conversations with the doctors were as brief as speed dates, and questions seemed to be regarded as signs of weakness. Just look at those joyous birth announcements from grateful couples papering every available surface in the examination rooms and hallways. What could be more important than that? And that's how mythology and fantasies are built. And you must be careful what you buy into. And from my point of view, you can never put faith in a doctor because a doctor is an employee of the medical industry. It's all they are. I don't care how friendly they are. I don't care how nice they are. I don't care how good of a person they are with you personally. They are just employees. And even if they have their own practice, they're still employees of the medical industry. And that's what we should come away from this with, especially in these times. Until next time, take care of your mind, take care of your body, and be safe.